Well, how cool is that? If any of you in this room believe that your background somehow eliminates you from becoming a great speaker and a great communicator, Diane has a different story for you. She was raised in beautiful southern Utah in the home of a forest ranger in the Manti La Salle Mountains. It was there that she was exposed to camping, hiking, exploring, and most important for her, cooking in the out of doors. Now, who would have guessed something like that could be a career? But she took her passion for outdoor cooking so seriously that, well, she turned it into a graduate degree. And then she took her master's thesis, and as you saw, turned that into a book, Roughing It Easy, which was published here at BYU. Now, BYU will tell you that wasn't only clever on the part of Dian Thomas, it was clever on the part of BYU, and as she told us earlier today, helped to build the printing press that BYU used in future years. Now, it was her appearance on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson that absolutely propelled that book into the stratosphere. It was on the New York Times bestseller list for months. And I want you to think of what that book was. If you don't have a concept yet, we're talking about someone who created a book on Dutch oven cooking and cooking over a campfire, made that into a New York Times bestseller. But it all linked back to those childhood memories of sourdough biscuits slathered in honey and butter. And she turned her passion into the career that she had for the rest of her life. And as she indicated to you, she began as an amateur, just like every one of you. But through diligence and creativity, she conquered every form of media. She conquered television, radio, live appearances, books, magazines, articles. She did it all. And quite frankly, I know she'd agree with me, she took some of the same material and simply repurposed it and gave it over and over again. But what she became most famous for was her absolutely, totally engaging live demonstrations, which you're going to get a glimpse of here in just a minute. Now, I have known Diane for years, and there are few professional speakers that are more dedicated and more consistent in learning over and over again what works. What worked yesterday will not work tomorrow, but she has been consistent in stretching herself, learning, growing, and always finding new ways to serve her audience. She is an amazing person, and warm, compassionate, caring, hardworking, and really a role model for every single one of you, because if you have a passion, you can turn it into your future prosperity. And that's exactly what Dian Thomas has done. Please join me in congratulating Dian Thomas in receiving the 2012 Donald C. Sloan Community Speaker Award. I love you.
Thank you. Thank you. I am so honored to be here today and to receive this award. Right in the light. Okay, cool.
Is she in the light?
I was going to sneak up on the stage, but I will do that later. It is an honor for me to be here. Roger asked me earlier as we were walking down the hall had I had been to BYU, and I even have a better answer now than I gave to him now. I said, listen, my tears watered the lawns here at BYU, and that's why they're green. But school was not as easy for me as it might be for some people, and so maybe I can share that story with you. Have any of you ever had an event in your life that totally changed your life? Well, as a very small child, I did have one of these events. And as Elaine told you, I grew up in the Manti La Salle National Forest in Monticello, Utah, with only about 1,000 people. My father was a forest ranger, and I loved the mountains. It was my passion, outdoor cooking, Dutch ovens. I fell in love with it when we went out Dutch oven cooking at Buckboard Flats, if any of you know Buckboard Flats. And my father, whose father was a sheep herder, and my mother's father was also a sheep man, would cook us these big sourdough biscuits, and I remember taking those out and pulling them open and putting a little butter and honey on them, and they would melt down your mouth. It was so delicious. But the one event that I remember the most was when we would come to Salt Lake once a year to see my relatives, and my aunt and uncle lived just south of the campus, about 2 blocks. My father had graduated from Utah State and my mother from the University of Utah. But the event that they created for us every time we came to Provo was a trip to campus. So we'd walk up here and my parents would say, "This is where you're going to go to school." And so even as a girl, very, very young, I always dreamed about the day I would come to BYU. And as you saw in the video, I took an aptitude test when I was in the 10th grade, and my teacher, or my counselor called me in, and I remember ducking down and looking at the glass, and then she said, "What are you going to do when you graduate?" And I stood up and I said, "You know, I am going to BYU." And she said, "I don't think you're going to make it. You don't have the skills." And I had done very, very poorly in English, probably at the bottom of the bucket. But in problem solving, I had 98 out of 100. And she said, "We think you should be an auto mechanic." And so for my creativity, probably that could have worked. But I wanted to come to BYU. And after I graduated from high school, I was accepted at the Y and was fortunate enough to get a job at the bookstore. And came down to BYU, and my parents suggested that maybe I could go and take a reading test at the lab, which was at the Smoot building, and maybe they could help me get my speed up. So I went and took the test, and I think it wasn't that I wasn't smart and that I couldn't do it. I just had a real hard time. A creative person has a hard time. They're like a butterfly. They want to fly here, check this out, and fly there. And I had a hard time settling down and just sitting and reading. But anyway, so I went up to the Smoot building and took the test. And I remember the counselor came back and gave me the same information that my counselor had done in high school. She said, "You know, I don't think you have the skills that you can make it through because of the reading and the writing and the rigors of it." And I said, "Well, you give me a chance." And so I remember feeling very dejected. I lived in Helaman Halls at the time, and I walked down Helaman Halls. But I thought, you know what? Another day is another day, and I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go. They cannot knock you out if you don't try. And so I started, and I did get 2 Ds in freshman English, but I said nobody ever asked about that. And I got a few more Ds along the way. Actually, I owned 16 hours worth of Ds, and you're the first audience to know that because nobody ever asked about that. They actually, in my career in the media, they just want to know if you can perform, and they don't usually ask you whether you get a degree or not. So, but anyway, I remember feeling really dejected, and I thought, you know, I told you on this, the blind students, so I hurried and asked all the blind students. Once I got my information back from the blind students, I thought, you know who got me here? My mother and dad. And so I called them up on the phone, and my brother Clyde, who's here, raise your hand, was 12 years old at the time, and he would drive down on the weekends with my parents in their little cream Volkswagen. They would drop him off to go with my brothers and take me up by the temple, and my mother would read to me, and my dad would read to me, and my mother would read to me, and my dad would read to me. And slowly, we all 3 made it through college. But I looked back on my life after I'd had such a spectacular career, and you can't imagine what wonderful opportunities I have had. And I thought, what are the 3 things that really made a difference? And I mentioned them in the video. But first of all was always being positive. You know, in our emotional life, there are 3 lanes at least. There's one being negative, and there's one being positive, and there's kind of in between. But if you can get on that highway and pick a lane, be positive about what you're going to do, it will make all the difference in the world. Opportunities will come that you never dreamed were possible. The second one, as I mentioned on the video, was being open to possibilities. But also, the second one I thought I would share with you today is persistence, because being persistent was what got me through BYU. I just was determined that there was not a class that was going to take me down. If I had to take it twice, I would take it twice. But I would continue until I got through BYU. And the third one is connecting to people. And that's probably the most important. And we'll talk about each one of these. So first of all is being really positive. You know, I had a boss in the bookstore. Her name was Bing Elliott. And Bing was the most positive and most wonderful person. I would work in the bookstore 3 to 4 hours every afternoon. And I remember when I would be kind of down because of my school was really hard. I might sometimes share that with Bing. And I remember one day she gave me a bit of advice, and she said, you know, Diane, don't let this sweat the small stuff. She looked in my eyes and she said, you know, you have talents that they can't even measure here at the university. And that would always lift me back up. And I remember another thing that I used to do is when I had so much to read and I didn't think I would get through it, and there were a few books that I didn't even get through for that test, I would say to myself as I'd walk across campus and water the grass, I would say, what does this mean in eternity anyway? So I would try to put it in perspective so that I could keep on and would not be weeded out because I didn't show up. So being positive was such a key, and reaching out to people was an important key to help me be positive. Second was to be persistent. I'm a tour guide now, thanks to Greg Witt, and I'll share with you how that happened. But I'm a tour guide to China, and I go to China 2 or 3 times a year. And one of the things that the vendors have in common, every one of them, is I tell my travelers when they get off the bus, I say, these people have a middle name of persistence, because no means just ask again. Just ask again. And they'll be, as we're driving away, saying, they'll be shaking their goods and showing us and trying to get us to buy. So if you can pick up that spirit of being persistent and just never give up, even if somebody tells you can't do it. I mean, I had 2 strikes against me by fairly good people, but I stuck with it, and that was the key. So being persistent is really an important piece. Henry Ford said, if you believe you can, you can, but if you believe you can't, you're probably right. So always stay in that positive lane and be persistent. The third one is connecting with people. And I think this is, if I could share anything with you, and you could sear this into your brain as I was seared into the brain to come to BYU, this is the one I would share with you, and that is connect with people and do it in a positive way that will, because people can be bridges for you that you cannot even imagine and take you places you would never go if you did not connect with that person. I was on BYU Education Week, and I was actually probably the youngest one on the Education Week program, and back then, instead of just having it on campus, we traveled from city to city. And we'd go to Phoenix for 3 days, Las Vegas for 3, and then on to Los Angeles. And I remember I only spoke from 2 to 5, so that left the morning open, and I had written the book Roughing It Easy, and one of the keys if you have something to sell is letting people know, and this was a golden opportunity because I could go out and do television, newspaper, and radio interviews. And I didn't have a lot of experience. I didn't quite know what I was doing, but there was a man on our tour. His name is Lynn McKinley. Some of you professors will remember him, right? Lynn McKinley had the most, like Roger, but it was even whiter, the most gorgeous white wavy hair. And when he would talk, he had the most gorgeous voice. I, in my own mind, would always say, he has the voice of God. So I fully expect when I get to heaven it will sound just like Lynn McKinley. But he was a wonderful person to help me. And I being, you understand this, I was somewhat insecure. I was just in my late 20s and traveling with BYU professors. Steve Covey's one I used to travel with, and giving presentations. And I just said, I don't know whether you'll help me. One day I got the courage up and I said, Lynn, would you please watch my TV show and give me feedback on it? And so he watched my television show and he said, okay, Diane, he'd always give me just one idea. He said, watch the camera with the red light. So those of you who know television, usually there's about 3 cameras out there, and the one with the red light is the one that's shooting the picture. So he said, watch that camera, or at least go to that camera when you have the opportunity to do it. Well, a year later, I was flying home from Florida, and Lynn was also flying home from Florida. But this time, I had an amazing opportunity to be on The Tonight Show. And so I said, Lynn, can you give me some ideas of what I should do for this appearance on The Tonight Show? I was going to be the first on The Tonight Show on June the 4th. And I ended up having 17 minutes that literally changed my life. Lynn said, what you need to do, Diane, is just take in charge. You need to keep ahead of him. So, if you're going to do something like start the steel wool battery, you jump in and do it and then let him follow you, and he will bring the humor along. And I followed his advice to a T. Well, the next day after I was on The Tonight Show, the book took off and went to the top of the New York Times bestseller list. It was only beat out by The Joy of Sex. So, so I figured, anyway, what an opportunity. But the book continued to sell, and we've actually sold that book for over $1 million, we've sold over 1 million copies of that book. But it did change my life to be able to have an opportunity like that. And that's what it is. And I think the wonderful thing about what you've done is you've prepared yourself to present yourself by taking these classes. So another one is when I was in Los Angeles, I had been on the road for 25 years, and there were some years I was on the road for 300 days. And so the side effect of that is you probably don't take care of yourself as well as you should. We were flying in and out of cities and different food, and all day long fixing food, and you take a snitch here. I found myself over 300 pounds. And I go, I can't do this. And I went to New York with a friend from Kraft Foods that I had worked with, and my knee was giving out, and on the way home, when I flew home, I had 4 hours to think about where I was in my life and what I had not done, and that was take care of myself. I got off that plane, and 3 months before, I had been speaking in Santa Monica on how to get $1 million worth of free publicity, and a lady in my audience was Jackie Keller. She came up after and gave me her card, and she said, I can help you lose weight. I was sure that she had a multi-level business and that I would be down the scale on the multi-level business, and she said, no, I will help you lose weight. And so I called Jackie, and between both of us working hard, she pressing me and I am working hard, I started riding my bike. And I was riding my bike a couple of hours a day, and Greg Witt went into Morris Murdoch one day, and they said, do you know anybody that can take a bike trip to China with us? So remember, I talked about how people can bridge the gap for you to go somewhere that you haven't been? Well, Greg told Morris Travel about it, and I just finished my 14th trip as a travel guide from that opportunity. So maybe we can just, first of all, be positive. Always pick the positive lane. Second, be persistent. And third, connect to people. I thought, in closing, I would like to just share with you a few of my demonstrations. So I'm going to come up here, and I will show you. Okay, thank you. Maybe you can just take this.
Yes. Okay.
Good. Okay, you saw this on television, but it's really a fun one. This is how you start your fire with a fine grade of steel wool and 2 batteries. You line the batteries up together like they go into a flashlight. You place your fine steel wool on the bottom, and then just brush it across the top, and like magic, it'll start a spark in the steel wool. And as you can see, thank you, thank you. Well, I thought all of you are just like this battery. You've got all this energy inside of you, and your teachers have been connecting you this semester to be good at your speaking. And they've been blowing on the steel wool to light your spark. And now you have the opportunity to go out and share that. But to me, sharing the spark that's inside of you is meeting somebody and smiling, taking their hand and shaking it with not just a limp hand, but a good handshake, and then being interested in them. So that's how you can let your spark out. Another one that's really fun is to take a bleach bottle. This is just a Clorox jug. I've placed soap in the nylon sock, hang it from the back, and the hole is, if the hole is really round here, if the hole is round and the lid is on there tight, as you can see, the water does not run out. So when I want to turn on the water, I just turn the water on and off by screwing the lid on and off. Is that cool? And then I get close enough to my audience, and then I can give them a shower. But what I would say to you on this one, the metaphor I'd like to bring out is each one of you have unlimited potential. And sometimes it's tough to unscrew that lid and let it out. I have to admit that when I was here at BYU and before in my high school years, I was very shy. But finally, I unscrewed the lid and let it out when I could start cooking on my tin can stove. So find your passion and let that wonderful, wonderful streams of joy that you have inside of you out. Another one is always put fun into your life, and this is one of my favorite ones. I take a wagon, place dirt in there, and put charcoal briquettes on the top, and then everybody in the family can sit around, and it is a wonderful evening activity. Some of you guys that are dating, this would be a fun one to do. But in that, you can take a banana, just take the banana and split it down the center of the banana, fill that with milk chocolate chips and miniature marshmallows, and then put that in a little piece of foil, or you can put an apple on and actually roast it right on top of the little barbecue. But place this on for about 5 minutes. It'll melt the chocolate and marshmallow down the center, and it is fabulous. You can also take an onion for the main dish. I already pre-cut this one, but take an onion about this size, cut the root and take the skin off, and then you can open it up like this and take the middle part of it out. Do that on both sides. You can use that later in soup. I'm taking a little hamburger. You'd actually season this up with a little spices, put that in the middle, and you have meatloaf inside of an onion. So you can take this onion, take a little piece of foil, wrap that up like this, bring the foil up to the top, roll that down in small folds, flat it out on both sides, and just cook this 15 minutes on each side, and you have a meatloaf inside of the onion. It is fabulous. These are wonderful. Thank you. Then put the fun and enjoyment into your life, and the one I thought about doing this is one of my favorite. You take a piece of bread. This will be great in your dorm. This is fabulous. Take a piece of bread, put cheese in between there, put a little butter on that, put a little butter on this side, put it in the foil, roll that up, and so when you're ironing a shirt in the dorm, you can just put your iron on that, and that'll grill your shirt. So you're ironing here, just grill the shirt. And after you've ironed half of the shirt, you turn it over. Do it on this side, so when you serve the shirt, you have a grilled cheese sandwich to go along with it. And last of all, when you've got a problem, remember, be creative. So take that problem and break it down. When you're over 50 and you're out on a camping trip, sometimes you have to venture out into the woods. And so I had a problem finding my flashlight in the middle of the night when I was half asleep in the toilet paper and keeping it dry and making sure everything worked out good. So what I do is I finally figured this out. I take a Ziploc bag and I remove the center part of this. And then we'll play like this is our tent, as I go outside, I just tie this so it's all together. When I wake up, I have my midnight survival kit. I tie it onto the tent post, and then I venture out in the woods and leave a trail behind me so I can always find my way back. You have been wonderful. Thank you for such an honor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, that's great. Thanks. I need to give you the mic. I'll give it to you.